Welcome to our financial aid evening presentation. We're delighted to have you here, and we hope that this information will prove to be informative and helpful. We ask you if you wouldn't mind waiting until the end of our slide presentation to ask questions. You can pose them in the Q&A afterwards, but we are hoping that this presentation will be quite comprehensive, and in fact, maybe your questions will be answered through the content, but certainly we welcome questions at the end, and especially generic questions. If we don't know the answer, we'll research, and we're happy to get back to you about it. Individual questions pertaining to families' specific finances, we typically prefer a one-on-one conversation, but we can certainly, help navigate that process, with you. So financial aid 101, essentially. No better time to be focusing on this than now, because the FAFSA has gone live October 1st. Before we get into that, I just wanted to mention we already have 1,100 students and parents registered for our upcoming college fair that we are coordinating with Faith Lutheran, Bishop Gorman, and CCSD. So we hope that you will join us and over 130 other colleges this coming Sunday at a virtual online fair. These are representatives from colleges who read and travel to Nevada. And so these are the admissions directors that you would want to really develop a relationship with. So we hope you'll take advantage of it to learn about options that are out there. It's available for sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So hope that it can prove informative for you. The link is here, the QR code is here, and you can register up until the day before, so the 10th. Okay, just wanted to mention that too. All right, so let's dive into financial aid and kind of the nuts and bolts. What is it and how do you get it? So financial aid, we basically think of it as an overarching term to refer to any money that you are receiving to help mitigate the costs. Money that you're receiving from colleges, as well as the federal government. So there's basically two kinds of aid, right? There's need-based aid and there's merit-based aid. And they're very different. Need-based aid is calculated based on the forms that you're filling out. So the feds will calculate how much you qualify for based on the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And there's a lot of complicated calculations involved in kind of coming up with the eventual number. We're not going to get into that right now, but we are going to get into what is exactly kind of considered, and what are the colleges and the government looking at. And then merit-based aid. Colleges, typically this is where colleges will determine based on talent and achievement what kind of scholarships they want to give students. The best packages are a mix of need-based aid based on the forms that you fill out and potentially can qualify for, and merit-based aid when the colleges say, we want you and we're going to give you incentive to come here because you're a high-performing student, and here's an extra $10,000 as an incentive. So typically when you receive now, because you can file starting in October. When students receive their admission letter, if they are admitted, that is typically, in many cases, when the colleges will also send their financial aid letter as well. Not all the cases, that's not all true, 100% of the time, but more and more colleges are trying to present, students with their package as soon as possible so that students can make an informed decision about what the costs are, since that is an increasingly important decision and factor. So really important to understand that not all money is created equal when it comes to financial aid, specifically, again, need-based aid. So the need-based aid is typically composed of, could be composed of a variety of what are called grants, which are free money, essentially. They do not have to be repaid. Those are the best kind. That's the best kind of money we like to receive. And that again is, you have to apply every year for the FAFSA for financial aid. So it can vary from year to year, but hopefully most of the financial aid that you receive is in the form of grants, knock on wood. Loans obviously have to be repaid. There's a couple of different kinds of loans. The most, I guess, popular and frequent loans that you'll see are what are called subsidized and unsubsidized loans that come from the federal government. I was actually just doing some research online before this presentation, and I looked up the interest rate on the direct subsidized and unsubsidized from July 2020 to July 2021. The interest rate now is 2.75%. Wow. I rarely see that. That's incredible. So, if there's ever I would say a reasonable loan to invest in, it's an educational loan for your future, for your at 2.75%, that's that's pretty good. So just wanted to pass that along. So subsidized loans are different from unsubsidized loans. Subsidized, we like to recommend more favorable because the interest is paid by the government while you're in college, versus unsubsidized, where the interest accrues while you're in college. So if you have the choice between subsidized and unsubsidized, just keep that in mind. And it is a fixed rate. So for the term of the loan, it is fixed. So it's not going to maneuver up and down based on the economy, based on anything like that. So that's pretty great. So work study, basically work study means that your student is going to get a job on campus. I typically recommend that if they're considering getting a job, that they don't work more than 10 hours a week, which is what I did when I was in college. And that still give me time for my academics as well as extracurricular activities. Work study, basically, it's an opportunity for students to, again, develop their resume, give them professional experience. One of the things that's great is that colleges give usually preferential treatment to students that have work study for campus jobs. So if you elect to accept work study or opt into work study, usually you'll be able to find a job on campus, which is preferable because campus jobs understand that you're a student first. And they're typically a little bit more flexible with their scheduling and your hours, the hours you have to work than, working at Starbucks or working at, off campus. So just want to point that out too. Scholarships. Scholarships can come from the college, they could come from outside organizations. But whenever you see a scholarship, if there's a word scholarship on your financial aid letter, that essentially means that's kind of equivalent to a grant in the sense that it doesn't have to be repaid. But you want to read the fine print of the scholarships because not all scholarships are renewable for, like, they might just be for that first year. They might not necessarily be for all 4 years. And you also want to know what are the qualifications for that scholarship. Do you have to maintain a certain GPA? Do you have to maintain a certain participation in a certain program? So I would just make sure to kind of read the fine print on that and clarify the nature of that scholarship. And I always say, if you have questions, now more so than ever before, it's important to reach out to the financial aid offices at your colleges, at every single school. Because just like the admissions process is unique to each school, some have supplements, others don't, some are test optional, others aren't. Deadlines vary. The financial aid process can vary as well. And each financial aid office is more than happy to answer your questions and help you kind of figure out how you can best maximize your financial aid. So I always encourage families to reach out, especially also as we get into some of these details with regard to finances. If your finances have changed significantly, or not significantly, if your finances have changed between the time when you submitted your taxes in 2019 and now, you're probably going to want to do an appeal. And you're going to want to reach out to the financial aid offices to let them know that your financial landscape is very different now than what it was in 2019. And again, you need to do that for every single school that your student is applying to. And I will also say that financial aid offices expect to hear from the parents. This is a parental conversation. Not that the students, shouldn't have skin in the game, because they do need to know absolutely, and have this conversation of, okay, what kind of loans am I willing to take on? What's the payment plan, et cetera. But if you're contacting the financial aid office, we recommend that the parent and the student do it together. And they don't want to hear from us in the college counseling office. I know that for a fact, having tried that with just asking questions. So the other two terms that we want to go over with you are cost of attendance and EFC. These are also very important to understand. So let's see. Cost of attendance is essentially, EFC, expected family contribution, or estimated family contribution. It's a formula based on your income, which is the most significant influencer and factor that determines whether your family will qualify for financial aid. And I want to be really clear about that, and this is one of those points of frustration that I can feel for families on, which is that what you think you qualify for and what the forms say that you qualify for can be two very different things. What you want and what you need can look very different. And the income is the number one factor that will influence how much aid you will qualify for. So really important, again, like if you have extenuating circumstances, anything that's impacted your income, whether it's medical expenses, legal expenses, I've had parents who have literally been said to me, I can't help with my child's loans because I'm still paying back my educational loans. I think it's important for colleges to know this. The more information they have, the better. Assets, the property you own, your family size, number of kids in college at the same time. So it estimates based on the cost of the college, the price tag, and in theory, at least, your ability to pay, and generates what the FAFSA then generates an expected family contribution in the final report, basically. And that is at the very end when you submit your FAFSA. You'll get a report that says we expect that you will your estimated contribution is X much amount. So we'll get back to that in a little bit. Cost of attendance, really important to know what your cost of attendance is. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with a student and they come to me with their financial aid letter, and the financial aid letter offers X much grants, certain amount of loans, and a certain amount of parental contribution, but we don't know what number we're working with at the very beginning. So we might say, okay, we've got $20,000 in grants, we've got $10,000 in loans, how much is left? How much do we still need to cover? And the only way to know that is by going on each college's website, on their financial aid and admissions site, specifically their financial aid site, and finding out, doing your research and writing down, I would say on a spreadsheet, each college's, what their tuition is, if they have any extra fees associated, room and board, that's basically, living expenses. And usually for a freshman year, that is also typically fixed at a certain number based on a certain meal plan, and also based on first year dorm availability and housing. Although, you elect to choose to live in a single, you're going to be paying a lot more. So just keep that in mind as well. Books and supplies, sometimes cost of attendance can include that. Other times, it's up to you whether you want to include that in cost of attendance. I'll say that books add up very quickly. And so I think it's important to factor that into your equation, especially also I hate to say it, but in the sciences. Those science textbooks can really rack up very, very quickly. And then transportation. So transportation will vary if you're driving versus flying and how often you plan on coming home. But so that falls into the category in many ways of personal expenses, and how much you plan to spend in college on just for personal reasons. But cost of attendance, at the very least, you should have written down and researched what's tuition, what's room and board. Those two in particular, that's the check that you'll be writing. So just keep that in mind. An estimator, you call a financial aid office and you ask them, based on this information that I'm providing, how much aid do you think I can qualify for? Good question, right? That is the big question. And what's a financial aid office going to tell you? They're probably going to tell you, well, we're happy to address specific questions, but if you want an estimate of your aid, we encourage you to use our net price calculator. On the financial aid sites, if you go to each college, you should find, and it is required for each college to have what's called a net price calculator. It will estimate based on your tax information, and sometimes also based on your student's academic information, how much aid you and your student could potentially qualify for. Net price calculators can vary in their accuracy. When we launched our net price calculator at Colorado College, when I worked at CC, our director of financial aid took it for a test drive and came within $500 of an actual package. That's how accurate it was. But it really also depends on how recently each college has updated their net price calculator. But that is a great tool to use. There's also another net price calculator called the FAFSA forecaster, which is another tool again. So I think that just plugging in that information, it takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes to do an estimate. And the reason why I think it's also a really good idea to do the net price calculator, and this is really important for students that are considering early decision. Early decision, remember, is binding, meaning that if you are admitted early decision, you are done. You are choosing to accept the financial aid and scholarship offer that college is making you. You do not compare financial aid packages. You do not compare scholarship opportunities. If you're admitted, it's one and done. And so you need to understand that what your prospects are for getting money from that school. And so really do your research with the net price calculator, because they're there for you to use and to help you understand this process. Good, okay. There we go. How do you apply? Where are you gonna get the money from? All right, so two major forms, right, which you've probably heard of. The FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. Anybody asking you to charge money to submit your FAFSA, that is not the correct site. First word in the FAFSA is free. So you go to FAFSA.gov. So I can actually toggle over and show you. So let's see, right over here. Student aid, even if you just Google the FAFSA, federal student aid, studentaid.gov, you'll find the FAFSA right here. So that is the form that all colleges, public, private, if you want money, if you want to qualify for financial aid, anything, any scholarships, grants, loans, work study, you need to file the FAFSA. Okay, that's the 2021 to 2022 FAFSA. Just make sure you're filling out the correct year, the correct version. And then that's the government, right? Institutional aid. This is the form that private institutions require. Many private institutions require this, and it's what we would call, or what parents have called, more invasive, because it asks more information, more detailed information about parent and student assets. But it basically, it's helping the colleges determine how much of their money, how much of their endowment, the private school endowment, you know, those are the rich schools, they can give to you to offset the cost. So really important to know that which forms are required and what those deadlines are for each of your schools. Because chances are, if you're applying to private schools, you will need to do the profile as well. And then local, regional, national scholarships, don't underestimate or discount. That money can really rack up. And we're going to show you how you can find some scholarships. One thing to ask the financial aid offices when you call them is, especially if you're one of those eager and you know, go-getter students that's applying for scholarships, is ask each college how much outside scholarship you can, you know, bring to the table before it starts impacting your financial aid package. Most colleges, again, most colleges, if you receive an outside scholarship, like of $10,000, most colleges will first deduct from loans after a certain amount, right? We'll first deduct from loans and say, okay, you're bringing in $10,000 extra scholarship money from outside source, so we don't need to give you this much loans, before they then start deducting from the grant money. the free money. So just clarify, especially if you are winning if you're winning a scholarship, if you accept that scholarship, at what level does it, start cutting into your financial aid, especially the free money that we so much want. Okay. Okay, so the difference between the FAFSA and the profile. Just want to clarify some of these differences. On the FAFSA, again, which is the government form, most money and property owned by the parent or the student is counted as an asset. These include savings and checkings accounts, cash, net worth of a business with over 100 full-time employees, investment accounts, that includes money market, brokerage funds, trust funds, etc. 529 accounts, right? So non-retirement tax-deferred savings plans, like 529s, tax-exempt interest income, tax credits, and investment property. The families for the FAFSA, the family's primary residence and retirement savings are not counted. This is for the FAFSA. Okay, so 529 accounts are counted as assets, retirement savings and home equity not for the FAFSA. The profile, most colleges still consider home equity, unfortunately, in their process for the profile. So that's the biggest difference in the profile, as well as retirement savings and assets are counted. So assets owned also by divorced parents and siblings are counted on the CSS profile. So that's why we say it's a lot more invasive and more detailed, because they want to know exactly what your family can afford and how much is reasonable to expect based on what you've been able to save. So, okay. I wanted to take a moment and clarify, because this is kind of tricky, and even for Michael and myself, it can get confusing about parental information. Who exactly is my parent? Especially if your parents are divorced. Who should you indicate as your custodial parent? And what's considered on the forms. So for the FAFSA, married parents, you're going to be providing both information, all right? Not married but live together, both information. Not married but you live together, okay? You have separate lives. You'll provide the custodial parent, okay? Whoever you live with, whoever your student lives with, more than 50%, 51%, 50.5% of the time. And then custodial parent remarried, it is parent and step-parent that are providing that information. So just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on those delineations. In cases of divorce, is the non-custodial parent required to help pay for college? So, the federal government does not consider the income and assets of the non-custodial parent, okay, in determining a student's financial need. However, it does consider child support received by the custodial parent. So, in case of a divorce, the assets and income of the non-custodial parent are not considered, but child support is included and is considered by the custodial parent. Many private colleges do consider, right, the non-custodial parent as a potential source and require a supplemental financial aid form from the non-custodial parent. These, again, are private schools, right? So this typically affects the awarding of the school's institutional aid through the CSS profile, but not the federal government aid. So again, just kind of clarifying whose income is considered, whose assets are considered, and how that could potentially impact how much aid that you are receiving, okay? For the profile, if the student's biological or adoptive parents are no longer married, okay, or living together, you must provide their information in separate applications. So this is what I was talking about for the profile for the private schools, right? Both parents, both mom and dad, have to provide, custodial and non-custodial parents need to provide their application, need to fill out the applications separately with the CSS profile. Select the one biological parent or adoptive parent whose information will be provided on the first application. If that parent is married or in a domestic partnership, you'll select that person's spouse or partner as their secondary, basically. So on each form, so when your mom, if your mom and dad are separated, if they are remarried, you're going to put your step-parents' information on that form, and that is going to be calculated and taken into consideration as well. So again, both parents need to fill out the forms, and if they've remarried or in a domestic partnership, then the step-parent will also include their information. Okay, so what information do you need in order to complete the FAFSA? And I realize all this information is online. If you go, you Google this information, but here it is, one-stop shopping. The FSA ID, and the student needs what's called an FSA ID, and the parent needs an FSA ID, right? The custodial parent. Or parent number one, I should say, whoever that is. So basically, if you Google FSA ID, right, it typically takes about 24 hours for you to receive your FSA ID. It is essentially your digital thumbprint, your digital signature. And you cannot submit the FAFSA without this, without both an FSA, student FSA ID and a parent FSA ID. Make sure to put these in very safe places. Do not forget them because they are they're critical to completing the forms. Social security numbers of student, of parents, driver's license information, if the student has one. If not, then obviously you don't have to worry about that. Really important, I can't stress enough, I had a parent of twins once actually accidentally mistakenly swap the social security numbers of their twins, and it was a nightmare to try and correct that. And fix that information. So really important to get all of these details accurate, and just take your time with it. So and after we go through this, I'll actually log into my FAFSA and I'll show you some of the different steps. And if you'd like to stay on and start completing it at that time, you can save it and then continue. So 2019 tax returns, 2019 W-2 statements, records of untaxed income. Okay. One of the great perks, one of the more recent innovations to submitting financial aid is what's called the IRS retrieval tool. And we'll be showing you that function, which is such a blessing, because if you filed your taxes online, but the click of a button called the IRS retrieval tool, your information, your tax information will pre-populate and you will not have to individually, manually enter all of that information into your FAFSA. So that's, you know, wow, talk about a time saving. So 2019 tax returns, 2019 W-2 statements, and savings and checking account balances, investments such as stocks, bonds, real estate that you own, whether it's like second homes, apartment complexes, property. So, you know, property where you earn an income from, not the home in which your family lives. You should report the current amounts in savings and checking accounts on the date that you sign the FAFSA, right? For the CSS profile, all students should have a College Board account. This is where I'll show you. If you go to cssprofile.collegeboard.org, this is where you will be filling out the FAFSA. So you can sign in right here, and the forms that are required. So gathering your financial documents, again, 2019 taxes, W-2 forms, and other records of income for both 2019 and 2020, records of untaxed income for both years, bank statements, mortgage information. One thing to keep in mind when you're asked about your net worth for home equity, this is the value of your assets, the value of your home minus what you owe on it, minus any debts. So don't overestimate the net worth of your house. This is a frequent mistake. So you want to, you know, just calculate accurately of what exactly your assets are worth, especially with your mortgage. Records of savings, stocks, bonds, trusts, documentation of any personal extenuating circumstances. Expect that if you do have extenuating circumstances, whether it's medical expenses or if it's certain property that might be still in your name but shouldn't be and needs to be considered under special circumstances, you will most likely be required to provide additional documentation showing proof of certain expenses or certain legal documents that you need to show evidence. So just keep that handy and expect that you might be asked for more information at some point. The parent, again, if it's a private school and it's the CSS profile, have their parent complete the non-custodial profile. Really important to know if this is required. The step only applies if your parents are divorced and separated and your school requires the non-custodial profile. So again, just make sure that you go to the financial aid websites for each of your schools and write down exactly what forms are required and what those due dates are. The profile is not free, unfortunately. It costs $25 to submit and then $16 to send to each college that your student is planning on applying to that requires the profile. So if they're applying to 20 schools and they're all private, you can do the math, unfortunately. But I will tell you, I mean, the most frequent question I typically get from parents is, I don't think I'm going to qualify. Should I even bother? And my answer to that question is always yes. Yes, 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 yes. And anytime you ask a financial or an admissions officer or financial aid coordinator, they will also say yes, even if you don't think you'll qualify, because you never know. You never know. And there's the thing called professional discretion, professional judgment that a financial aid office can use when amending or negotiating financial aid. I love to tell the story of how I was deciding on my colleges at one point when I was in high school, obviously, and trying to decide between Wellesley, Smith, and Mount Holyoke. I knew I wanted a women's college, and Mount Holyoke had offered me almost a full ride. And I remember sitting down with the financial aid office at Smith College, and I said, well, I have this package really from, a similar school, because it's apples and apples, right? You can't do this if schools are very different, and not all colleges will allow you to do this anyway. So if you want to use this technique, talk to me first, talk to us first. But I basically said, well, I have a financial aid package from Mount Holyoke here, and this is what they're offering. And I love your school, and financial aid is going to be a big factor. And they literally took my financial aid package and added an extra $10,000 right then and there because they wanted me. I ended up going to Wellesley, but it was just that offer just speaks volumes. And I say, how the admissions office and the financial aid office treat you is kind of an indicator and a reflection of how the college is going to treat you. As a student, as a parent, if they're bending over backwards for you, if they're friendly and easy to talk to and easy to engage, and they really want to help you as much as possible, that's a great sign. And that bodes well for future conversations as well. So in any case, that's information about the profile. And the FSA ID. So going back to the FSA ID, if you haven't done this already, parent and student, please do this as soon as possible, because then you can start filling out your forms and can start the application process. All right. And this is kind of what your FSA ID, what the page should look like. Let's see. In terms of extenuating circumstances, by the way, there is a space on the FAFSA and also on the profile for you to explain extenuating circumstances. And so you'll have an opportunity to offer further data and information about anything that has potentially caused an impact to your family's finances. So there is a space on the forms for extenuating circumstances. There's a prompt there. So you'll be able to do that. But I also think it's always a good idea to also call the financial aid offices, contact the financial aid offices, because I have also seen on some financial aid websites additional forms on their site saying, if you have extenuating circumstances, please fill out this form here and send it to us. So always a good idea to do that. And I've also seen like Cornell University has on their financial aid site even an appeals form that you can download and have handy after you get your financial aid letter and say, we might need to appeal this. So find a lot of that documentation on the financial aid sites too. So. All right, I was talking about the linking to the IRS retrieval tool. We'll get to this, but I wanted to show you how great this is. I started when I was filling out the FAFSA just the other day as I was preparing for this. You get to the point where you reach the parent financials, and this is really important to make note. So when you're filling out the FAFSA, pay attention to the label at the top of your screen and make sure that it says where it says student, right? And at a certain point, it will change over to where it says parent. make sure that you're putting the student information in the student section and the parent information in the parent information. I once had a student who accidentally put her mom's income in in the student section. She did not qualify for aid until we found that error and we corrected it. And you can do a correction. You can submit a corrected financial FAFSA if you find that you need to make an update. But really important to make sure that you're putting the correct information in the correct space. But once you get to past parent demographics and into parent financials, if you can link to the IRS and do the retrieval tool, do it, because I think the biggest advantage is that it'll minimize the likelihood of mistakes. If you choose to do it yourself, because you need to personalize or really like you have a more complicated financial situation, which is usually when you can't link. If you submitted a more unusual tax return, it might not let you link, and you might have to do it manually. And in that case, just go line by line. The FAFSA will literally tell you, okay, for this question, refer to line 11B on your 2019 taxes, right? So just go step by step, because again, we want to make sure that we don't have any human error in the process. Okay, so once you submit your FAFSA, you're going to want to save this form. You're going to have a form that's generated or a document that's generated, and it's called the SAR, the Student Aid Report. It includes the expected family contribution. So you can see at the top where you'll see the EFC on the top right. And basically, the ideal number, of course, is all zeros. All zeros means that you're not expected to contribute anything. The income for qualifying for zero aid to zero out is $27,000. If your family makes less than $27,000, and I'm not sure exactly what the household size is for that. It wasn't specified, but that's typically the point where you'll start seeing what are called Pell Grants, which are for students that are low income and qualify for the greatest amount of need. But whatever that number says, that's what is expected, that the government is expecting that you will contribute to offset to your students' college education. The report will tell you if there's any anomalies that are found. Really important to print and save this. I usually just say, save it as a PDF on your desktop so you have it available, and you can easily refer to it. And also you can bring it with you if you decide you want to meet with us in the financial to go over your financial aid package when you receive it. We are more than happy to sit down with you and review your financial aid package with you. And at that point, what I usually ask for is, all right, show me your spreadsheet or your documentation that includes your research, that shows me you determined what your cost of attendance is at each of your schools, and how much aid you've received. And I also want to know what was your expected family contribution? Because if your expected family contribution was, $10,000, and the college is basically saying, well, we think you can afford $25,000, there's an opportunity there to make an appeal, especially if the numbers are if there's a significant difference in what the FAFSA says that is expected and what your financial aid forms are saying that you've been granted. So please, feel free to come in and talk to us after you get your financial aid award letters. And we do. There we go. Hi. I also do recommend waiting until you have at least a couple of financial aid letters under your belt, financial aid packages to bring in so we can compare. And that way we can just give a sense of kind of, we can really see where the differences lie between the colleges and how much money they're offering. If your student, when they receive an admissions letter, if they don't receive their an estimate or the financial aid letter, don't panic right then and there. It could be that they're one of those schools that it'll take a couple of weeks. But I would say if more than a month passes that your student has not received their financial aid package, I would pick up the phone and I would call the financial aid office at your colleges, at whatever colleges that package is outstanding at, because something might be missing. And the only way to know that is to call them and ask. Okay. This is a great college comparison worksheet that I found online that I would recommend using especially if your student is applying to a number of schools. It's just great to be able to look in a very comprehensive way at the differences between the financial aid packages and also the costs, quite honestly, between the different schools. So we'll actually show you this form is available on the College Counseling website. So if you would like to use this form, I will show you where you can find it. But I think it's a really great form that, again, just goes through all the different kinds of loans and the financing and what potentially you might see on a financial aid letter, because sometimes they're called something different. At each school calls, an institutional. Some schools might call free money their institutional grant. Some might call it a scholarship. So just really important to know those terms and document it. So that form, the worksheet, as well as a variety of other helpful listings and links, information can be found on the College Counseling website. We've really tried to boost the amount of resources and information on our website. So if you go to the College Counseling site and then on the right-hand panel, just scroll down to financial aid and scholarships, you'll find this page. And if you're wondering where else can I find money, right? Where are those national scholarships? Where are the local scholarships? Where are the state scholarships? That I could potentially, should be looking at. This is the place to start because the scholarships that we've listed here under the Nevada and national scholarship listings, those are vetted, and those are scholarships that are what I would consider to be reputable. So I would take a look there first. I believe there's about 57 of them listed. And of course, not everyone is going to qualify for every scholarship. It's really important to read the fine print, but this is a great place to start. So if you're wondering, gosh, I'm overwhelmed by, you do a Google search and you're overwhelmed by the amount of scholarships out there, start here and see if that helps too, because you might uncover money that you didn't know. And again, pay attention to deadlines because they are coming up. Some of them, and some of them also are unique to specific colleges as well. So just pay attention to those deadlines. And what I mean by that is, while these national scholarships or state scholarships might have their own deadlines. Colleges might have separate scholarship forms that are required. So it's, again, really important to know, okay, do the schools that your student applying to, do they offer merit scholarships? Do they offer scholarships? And if that's the case, are students automatically qualified or automatically considered for scholarships when they're merit-based money when they apply for admission, or are there any separate forms that are required? And just to be clear, I'm talking about merit-based aid, not need-based aid. So just to delineate that. So when we talk about scholarships, we're usually talking about merit-based aid versus grants, which are the need-based aid. Hope that makes sense. All right, so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot over to, so that's the content right now. If there are questions, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A, and I'm happy to help address, answer any questions that you might have. But at this point, what I'd like to do is I'm going to pivot over to the FAFSA. So if you'd like to join me, you are more than welcome. If you are, want to log off and work on your own FAFSA, that's fine too. But so I am on my FAFSA. Another website that I usually go to is fafsa.ed.gov. Okay, which basically takes you back here. So start. All right. And actually, let me go back so I can show you. I started right here. So new to the FAFSA process, if you're new, if you're filling out for the first time, that's where you want to start. If you're a returning user and you're correcting information or you're adding a school, again, really important to make sure that, if you are submitting the FAFSA and you submit it and you decide, oh, wait, I'm going to apply to some more schools, make sure that all the schools you're applying to receive your FAFSA and potentially the profile as well. So I am the student. If you are the student, you'll click on I am the student. If you're the parent, I am a parent, preparer, or a student from a freely associated state. So I personally, only students may use, so really important to note here, only students may use their FSA ID to log in. Parents and others can start a FAFSA for a student by entering the student's identifiers. Okay, so let's read that again. Only students can use their FSA ID. So, but parents and guardians can start a FAFSA by entering student identifying information. I think it's like social security number, birth date information, etc. Parents and others can also work on the FAFSA form or correction that the student started, or corrected form the student started using the save key that the student made. Okay, so I'm going to click on I am a student, and let's see. I actually have verified my phone number. So actually, hang on. So there's a couple ways to get in, right? It was, and I'll go back really quickly. So when I said the student, so FSA ID, you can use your student's FSA ID, which is why it's really important to have that information. The email address that they used when they signed up for the FSA ID, or their mobile phone number if they verified that through the process already. Okay. If you've forgotten your username, forgotten your password, which I've certainly done that, and there's no shame really. You can click on the forgot password, forgot user ID, and get that information again. Okay. You're accessing a federal government computer system. I'm going to accept. Okay. So now we are in the FAFSA, and I'm just going to pause here. So if anyone's doing this, I've literally had parents walk through this with me, doing their own FAFSA and completing it with me. So if you're with me, then kudos to you. That's awesome. So make sure you're filling out the 2021 to 2022 FAFSA. Okay. And for me, since I started it, I can continue, or I can just start over. I'm going to choose to continue. And then down here also, you can use your FSA ID to sign your FAFSA electronically or make corrections to your FAFSA. All right. So continue. The student will choose a save key, also really important to remember. It's basically just another piece of security that the FAFSA uses to determine that you are who you are, and no one's trying to hack into your personal private information. That is very serious. They take all of this information very seriously. I had parents, I've had parents in the past say, I don't want to fill out the forms because I don't want anyone to have access to my my social security number. And unfortunately, the only way that you can qualify for money, for financial aid, is to fill out the forms. And I've never heard of a situation where there's been a leak in information from the filling out the FAFSA. In terms of personal documents. Okay, so I'm going to go back to student demographics here. So student demographics, I'm not going to go back to student demographics. So because, you know, I've got my social security number there, but you're going to want to fill out the student demographics first. And I say to my students, if there's one number that you should memorize in your life, it is your social security number. So you're easily able to put that in to any financial documents that you might need to fill out in the future. So fill out the student demographics and go through all of that information. Then you're going to want to select your schools. So what schools do you want to receive the FAFSA? And this is great time to, if your students are on the computer, they can pull up Naviance. And by logging into their Naviance account, and parents, if you've never seen their Naviance account, this is a great time to peek over their shoulder at their college lists. And see, okay, where are you applying? And what are your deadlines? So they can log into Naviance and go to the colleges tab in Naviance, and they'll see colleges I'm applying to. If they click on colleges I'm applying to, that's a great way to just make sure that you're not forgetting any schools. One other trick I sometimes, not trick, but one other thing I sometimes do with my students is I will ask them, all right, tell me, you know, where will you be applying? You know, without looking at your FAFSA, without looking at Naviance or Common App, tell me all the schools you're applying to. And if you forget a school, or if your student forgets a school, or maybe, you know, has trouble recalling all of them, they might want to reconsider applying to that particular school that they forgot to mention. Just saying. So I usually like to make sure and double check that that we haven't forgotten any schools when you're sending the FAFSA and in the application process. So just based on my experiences, just giving you food for thought. Okay, so again, here, this is student information. See where it says student information. We want to make sure it's the student, not the parent. I put in the Meadows school, where's the city, and we confirm that information, all right? And then click confirm, so we confirmed, good. We select the Meadows school, good. Okay, and then we click next. All right, so if you want, this is where you add the schools. Search for colleges to which you'd like to send your FAFSA information. You can add up to 10 colleges at a time to your FAFSA. If you're applying to more than 10 colleges, what you have to do is you submit, and then you go back in and you update it again. So I'll show you, right? So you make FAFSA corrections. So you submit it to the 10, and then you log back in, you make corrections, and then you submit it to that additional 10 schools if you are applying to whatever beyond 10, okay? So then what we're gonna do is, if you don't know those schools' federal code, which I don't expect anybody to, you'll just go through and start selecting, choosing your schools. You can sort by, or search by the school name and the state, okay? We select it, and if you wanted to add more, you can add more, okay? So you just want to go through and start adding all of your schools up. And you can search and see all the schools, all the different schools. Make sure that you please also make sure that you're selecting the correct school and the correct location. It seems obvious, but I've had students who've sent the FAFSA to the wrong University of Alabama in the wrong city. So just keep that in mind, that you're selecting the correct school and the correct city. Okay. All right. Then it's going to ask you, do you want to live on campus? Are you planning on living off campus? All right, so you're going to select on campus. If you are living, just approximate. I mean, chances are, as a first-year student, most colleges require freshmen to live on campus. And even with the pandemic, they've really tried to give priority to freshmen, to first-year students, to ensure that first-year students have an easy transition, and because that residential life experience is so important to a student's engagement and enjoyment of college. So unless there's a real specific reason why you would be commuting, I would say, on campus. Okay. All right. So again, we're in the student information. Always a good idea to double check which section you're in. What is your marital status as of today? I'm single, right? I think all of our students are single at this point, right? So next, right? Do you have or will you have children? Do you have children as a student? Yes or no? No. Do you have dependents? Okay, who live with you? Who receive more than half of their support from you, the student, not parent, but from you, the student. Do you have dependents who you have to financially support? Chances are no. All right, household size, okay. Number in college. How many people in your household will be in college in 2021 to 2022? Right? So college, the FAFSA will, your financial aid contribution, or your expected family contribution will be impacted if you have 2 kids in college at the same time. As to how much, it just depends. I really can't answer that question, but make sure to indicate that. Okay. I'm considered an independent student because I put in my date of birth, which makes it more than, I'm older than 18, but you as a dependent student, most of our students are going to be dependents on their parents. And so you're going to go through and answer your parent information as well, right? You're not an independent, at least for undergraduate, most times. All right, so this is where you start putting your parents' marital status, right? We're going through parent demographics right now. As of today, what is your parents' marital status? Never married, unmarried, and both legal parents living together, married or remarried, divorced or separated, widowed. Right, so we're going to select which one, and then when did your parents get married? So again, if the student is the one filling this out, you're going to need to consult with your parents on this. Okay, right. Okay, good. And that was nice. One of the other things that's really helpful is this little, do you see the little question marks here? So if you're not sure how to answer a question, I would encourage you to click on the little question mark, and you'll get a pop-out with further instructions, and these can be really, really helpful to answering additional questions that you might have or clarifying uncertainties. So this goes into more detail about marital status and how to indicate that correctly. Okay, so parents' social security information, parents' last name, parents' date of birth. So all of this information, right? You're going to want to fill all of this out. If your parents are undocumented, please come see us, either Mr. Holloman or myself, and we can work with you on the forms and helping you fill those out. So if you have specific questions, if related to having undocumented parents, we're happy to help you with that, right? And walk you through that process. So just go through and put in all of your information, parents' information. This is parent one, right? Typically, I recommend designating who. If you're wondering who to put down first, I typically go with who was the parent that claimed you on their taxes. That's usually going to be parent number one. That's usually going to be the custodial parent. If you're thinking, okay, if your parents are divorced, who claimed you on their taxes? That's typically, and obviously if they're divorced, who you spend more than 50% of the time with. But in terms of parent one, it's usually the parent that, filled out the taxes. So, okay. Right, and you'll have a nice little pop-up here if there's an error, which is great. You can see that reported the same, so there. I just came up with a random information. So personal information for other parent. So this is the second parent, okay? So just make sure that you're clarifying that you're putting in the identifying information for each parent, okay? This is enter information for your other parent. And that could be if your parents have remarried, father and stepmother, or mother and stepfather, or domestic partners, etc. Okay. Have your parents lived in the state in our state for the last 5 years? Yes or no? So if they say no, what is your parents' state of legal residence? Okay. Again, if you have a question about that, you can do the little pop-up. I'm just going to say yes for now. All right, and then household size. So this is really important right here to indicate other people, right here where it says other people. I had a couple of situations with families where a grandparent would live, a grandparent was living with the family, and the parents provided more than half of the support, living expenses for that grandparent. You need to include them in your household. Because that affects your financial aid, how your financial aid is calculated. Because you would have an additional mouth to feed, essentially, or for another person to care for. So, make sure that you're, including everyone in the household that you are providing for monetarily more than half their support, and that you'll continue to provide more than half their support through the coming year. Okay, and they live with your parents. So just keep that in mind. This one here, your parents' other children, even if they do not live with your parents, if your parents will provide more than half of their support, and then these children can answer no to the dependency status question. And again, if you have questions about that, you can do a pop-up here as well. Won't need to provide information for your parents if you were born, like all of this information here. So, okay. So parents, other children, other people, how many family members, number in college, how many people in your parents' household will be college students? Do not include your parents. For 2019, have your parents completed their IRS tax return or another tax return? If you've already filed and completed it, here's where here's the great beginning of where you can start selecting the IRS retrieval tool. So if you've already completed, you're going to want to select then what type of income tax return did your parents file. Okay. All right. What is your parents' filing status? Okay. Married joint return. And this is where, if you filed online, you can then click on link to IRS. And hopefully the rest of that information will then populate. If you can't do link to IRS, then you'll be asked to go line by line through your tax information. Okay. And they will literally, like I showed you, like I told you before, this amount is found on the IRS form 1040, line 8B. And so literally they'll go through and tell you line by line, this number is found here, this number is found here, etc. Okay. You want to make sure to get all the way to the sign and submit, and you want your confirmation. So the confirmation at the very end showing that it was submitted successfully. Okay. So that's the FAFSA, the profile, and again, make sure that you know if the profile is required at your school. You can actually check on, if you go to cssprofile.collegeboard.org, you can check participating schools and see if your school that you're applying to requires it. So you can say yes to CSS Profile domestic students, and you can see all the schools that require the profile. Okay. So we are going to sign in to fall 2021 and spring 2022. All right. And this is my student information. Okay, so all of your students should have this because should have already have a student college board account if they took the PSAT, if they took the SAT, if they took AP exams, they have a college board account. So your student has a college board account. So you want to sign in. All right, so student name should appear here. And you can see that I've started on my application already, but I'm going to continue it. And I'm going to go back so you guys can see. So the few people that are still with me can actually see what we're looking at. We start at the beginning with getting started about the student, information about your student, student status, all this information here. We save and continue. And it's also really nice that, like on the FAFSA, they have, the profile also has instructions here to help walk you through this process too. So what's also nice is they indicate, okay, this specific information is about the student, and then we get to a point where we transition to the parent. So Melissa has legal dependents. No, right? I'm not a veteran. I'm not a ward of the court. I'm not currently in foster care. Have I been, determined to be an emancipated minor by the court? Am I homeless or at risk of being homeless? Okay, so save and continue that. All right. Permanent address, mailing address, all that good information. Demographic, confirm demographic information, first name, social security number. This right here, I was told you can leave it blank if you don't know this. The College Board Financial Aid ID, it's not required, and you don't need to fill that out if you don't know it, okay? This information is accurate and complete. Save and continue, and then we move on to the parent information. So parents' relationships, okay? And you can actually remove a parent if you are modifying, how many parents you are reporting. Okay. I'll just keep that in mind. Include all parents, biological, adoptive, step parents, parents' partner, legal, and legal guardians. Information is used to help your schools understand your family situation and build a personalized application. It's critical that you be accurate and complete. If you answer incorrectly and have to change information after you've completed other sections, it may result in that information be considered invalid. Okay, just make sure you do that. Household verification, what's the marital status? Okay, that best reflects your parents. And then I'm not going to go through the rest of this, but basically go through every single section: residence, academic information, parent details, parent income. Okay. Next section includes questions about the student's parents, their education, their employment. Okay. Assets, expenses. All right. So here's where you can also put, Melissa's parents have the following expenses? Check all that apply. So this is where you can indicate, I have medical expenses that weren't covered by, or dental expenses not covered by insurance. So definitely mention that if you have, especially, if they're continuous. So This is where you can put that information: repayment of student loan debt. You can select alimony as well. So check all that apply, right? Again, really important to just be as detailed as possible. Student income down here. Some colleges, and again, this is why it's really important to do your research. Some colleges, if a student has not filed taxes, some colleges will want a student to submit a non-filing form that to verify that the student has not filed taxes. So just keep that in mind, and look to see whether your specific school requires the student to also do, if a student hasn't filed taxes, to do a non-filing letter verification. Okay. Student tax return information, student expected income, student resources, students' assets. All right. Right, so we had parents' assets here. I'm going to go back to parent assets really quickly. Parent assets, in the section will ask assets for the parent. Investment assets, right? Are they held in the names of your children? Are they assets you own but held in the names of your children? No. My hope is that the assets are in the parent's name, not the student's name. Save and continue. Okay, so then we go through how much is in the parent's, cash, savings, checking and deposit account, current market value of investments, right? Asset information, etc. So, question. With regard to the CSS profile, can we go back and add more schools once it's been submitted? Yes, you can go back and add more schools. Yes. Or is it necessary to add and pay for all possible schools before? No. So you submit, and then you go back through and you submit it again, and pay again with the additional colleges that you're adding. Good question. So also down here at the very bottom, you'll see special circumstances. This is really important, and I would, definitely fill this out if you have any additional information that you want to communicate to the colleges. Select the circumstances with ongoing financial impact that apply to your family. Provide details of the financial impact, including annual amounts paid, in the box below. Okay. Change in employment, COVID, scholarships, exceptional medical expenses, catastrophic events. I imagine students, my heart goes out to the students in California, but, I would say if a student lost their home because of a fire, I mean, that's a catastrophic event that I would, absolutely report. Elder care expenses, anything other, report it, absolutely. And then you'll go through and you'll submit. Okay. I realize this was a lot of information. Thank you for sticking with us as we went through this. We're happy to answer individual questions if you have, if you want help, if you want us to help you navigate the forms on a one-on-one basis. We're more than happy to help, and certainly when you get your financial aid award letters, to help you decipher what exactly they mean. But we hope this is helpful for you, and it at least gives you some idea of how to start this whole process. And hang in there, because there's a lot of people here to help you. And do not hesitate to reach out to us. Whatever we can do. Our doors virtually, our virtual doors are always open. So, okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Michael. And we'll see our students tomorrow. Okay. Good night now.